Hello everyone, welcome to our exclusive virtual event today, Securing Digital Transformation in the New Normal. A very hot topic at the moment that will be discussed and debated with a number of highly respected cybersecurity leaders that are kind enough to speak at our event today. My name's Lulu Dowell, I'm from Unit Technologies, and I'd first like to welcome our panel facilitator, Amar Singh, CEO of Cyber Management Alliance. I'd also like to welcome David Cass, VP of Cyber and IT Risk, Federal Reserve Bank of New York Supervision Group. We've got our very own Mark Kedgley, CTO at Unit Technologies. Mahbubul Islam, CISO, HM Courts and Tribunal Service. We have Mudassar Ulhaq, CIO at Waverton Investment Management. And Angus Macrae, Head of Cybersecurity at King's College London. So thank you to our guest speakers for joining today. I know the audience is excited to listen to your insights and experience, what you've got to say. To our audience, if at any stage during the event you have a question, please submit them through the Q&A panel on the screen, and we'll endeavour to get to them during the Q&A time towards the end. So without further ado, I'll pass you over to Amar Singh to kick off the panel. Thank you very much. Hello everyone, welcome to our exclusive virtual event today, Securing Digital Transformation in the New Normal. A very hot topic at the moment that will be discussed and debated with a number of highly respected cybersecurity leaders. I'm Lulu Dowell from Unit Technologies, and I would first like to welcome our panel facilitator, Amar Singh. Amar, I'll hand it over to you to introduce yourself and also introduce our speakers, if that's okay.
Oh, that's okay. Everybody, welcome, and hopefully you can see me. The blue turban is very iconic. I'm a cybersecurity practitioner, and I love what I do, and I'm really excited to have I know all of these people over here, and they're all professionals. They have a lot of insights to share, and I'm going to go, I guess, first Mahbubul, as I see on the screen. Mahbubul, over to you to introduce. Angus, then to you. Mudassar, then over to you, and then to Mark. So Mahbubul, I'll start with you, sir.
No problem. Thank you, Amar. Mahbubul Islam. I am a Chief Information Security Officer for HMCTS, which is Her Majesty's Courts and Tribunal Services. And like many colleagues in security, I've been around for 12 years, and so I classify myself as a learner, and we're still learning as we go along, even though we've done a number of years in security. And I'm delighted to be on this session to discuss the new norm.
Excellent. That makes you 12 years old. Thank you, Mahbubul. Angus, how old are you, sir? No, I'm just kidding. You know what I mean. Wait, just unmute yourself. Sorry, Angus. Angus, 1 second.
Cybersecurity for King's College London. I work for a company called King's Business Limited, who run King's Service Centre, actually out of Cornwall. So in effect, we've been working in the new normal of remote working, supporting an organisation hundreds of miles away for some time. Really pleased to be here. Really interesting looking panel of people, and yeah, let the discussion begin.
Thank you, sir. Mudassar, over to you, Mudassar.
Brilliant, thank you. Mudassar Ulhaq, I'm Chief Information Officer for Waverton Investment Management. I've been at Waverton for over 15 years, and my role pretty much covers a wide vast of technology support requirements through to the oversight of security. Waverton are a investment firm based in the West End of London, and as you can appreciate, a heavy duty and responsibility on myself and my team to ensure that we maintain our client assets on a daily basis, and obviously ensure that cybersecurity is kept on the toward top of the agenda, especially with the current times that we're facing over the last 6 months.
Excellent. Mark, before I go to you, one of the things I just want to remind everyone, and I'm sure hopefully everybody agrees, if you have had, let's say, 1 office or 5 offices with 10,000 people, today you have 10,000 offices plus 5 offices, right? And that's the new reality that we all are going to have to live with. Things may change, people may come back, but there will still be, there is going to be no longer only 5 offices, right? So, Mark, over to you to introduce yourself, and then we'll go straight into this panel discussion. Go.
Great, yeah, thanks, Amar. It's Mark Kedgley. I'm CTO at Unit Technologies, one of the co-founders of the business. I guess a relative veteran, probably had about 25 years and counting in the IT industry, and a little bit like Angus. You know, we've been working as a remote distributed business right from the inception, with personnel right across the US and Asia. So the new normal was pretty much like the old normal for us, but we don't know how lucky we are.
Excellent. That makes Mark 25 years old. I'm just kidding, just trying to have a bit of a laugh, everybody. So all the panelists, welcome, and thank you for taking out the time. The topic of the theme is securing digital transformation, but in this particular session, we're going to focus on redefining security in post-pandemic, right? And even in the current pandemic. I mean, we are nowhere near post. We are still in the middle of the storm, and there's some really interesting things. So the first question I want to start with, have you noticed a more compliant workforce? And as just to set the scene again, where someone may have had one office with 1,000 people, you have now 1,000 offices, the 1,000 employees, but also 1,000 endpoints, 1,000 networks, if I may. So initially, I will go by name. After that, we can make it a discussion. If I do interrupt the panelists, it's only for time purposes. So have you noticed a more compliant workforce? Mahbubul, over to you first, sir. Unmute. Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. So I think the question needs to be possibly asked in a different context, a number of contexts, right? So I'll answer it from a perspective of our organization. So there are a lot more focus on being compliant as a workforce in terms of people. Most people are not in their normal offices, but when you've got an organization such as ours, where we've got court facilities and stuff like that, we still got to provide a full service to the public. So it requires a lot more careful consideration on what we do and how we do things. A lot more focus on risks, focus on overseas working. If somebody's left the country because they were on holiday and they've been stuck out there, there's focus on that. And then there is also a little bit more attention to potential data losses and thefts. So as a workforce, it's all changing in location-wise, how they get access to IT, where they get access to IT from, and in terms of security management and protective monitoring side of things, it's elevated us as well. So they are compliant, they will respond more quicker, the technology is right there, so it helps communicate better as well. So I think there's a lot more, in my opinion, there's a lot more togetherness as well. As a result of this, people look at the bigger picture now, as opposed to just the thing that they were always worried about themselves. So it's a lot more working, the workforce a lot more together and such. So that's where I would leave that, and other colleagues answer.
Thank you, Mahbubul. Angus, what are your thoughts on this? Highly distributed, working from everywhere. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, again, I think I'd have to answer it in a number of different ways because of the different user base that we have. So we have a professional services workforce, which isn't dissimilar to most businesses, but obviously we also have the academics, the e-learning people, the students themselves, the research community, and all these have vastly different risk appetites and requirements. Some of them more used to sort of remote distributed working than others. So the professional services we've been fairly good with. I think they've got an increased awareness of how reliant they are on IT services now, and that's given us quite a boost, that people are now looking to us that we're not just part of what they do anymore. We're absolutely everything. It's the only way they can operate. So there's been, I think, a lot of support and a lot of positive feedback. And with that, you have the chance to emphasize the sort of security messages as well. More challenging areas around things like research communities, where they have very bespoke esoteric setups and trying to quickly enable full VPN remote access for these type of environments more challenging. But we've worked with them and introduced things like codes of compliance where we can't necessarily force them to use managed equipment. So different risk appetites, different opportunities, different challenges, really.
Okay, that's really insightful. Yeah, and it's really interesting to see actually many staff are stepping up and actually complying, if I may, or trying to comply. I think all humans want to do the right thing.
And I think, yeah, because particularly those who are less used to remote working and being in the office, because of the strangeness of that type of approach, and it's suddenly always my connection secure. One of the big fusses not long after the pandemic was around Zoom, obviously, and the sort of negative publicity that had. So we were bombarded, probably like most people, with queries: is Zoom safe to use? Should we tend to corporately use Teams? Is that better? Should we not use Zoom? But people were asking the right sort of questions, even if that was sort of drawn out of a naivety, so to speak.
Absolutely. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for that. Mudassar, you unmute, but you've got extremely posh offices. You and I have met many times in those beautiful offices. Hopefully we can meet again there. But for now, the reality is everyone's remote and working from anywhere, I guess. What has your experience been, Mudassar?
I think, yeah, well, firstly, I do miss the offices, and I'm sure you miss the actual facilities we have on the 6th floor.
And the biscuits.
Absolutely. I think the challenges we've seen, without no doubt, has been, you know, the norm has been that the teams that we have, the investment teams, work collaboratively, face to face, together. And the reality is collaboration outside of your norm, of your comfort zone, is one of those that, you know, it relies heavily on the employees to adapt, and I think adaptation over the last 6 months now has been probably a big driver behind you know, a successful organization over the last 6 months, or effectively running successfully over the last 6 months. And if you've got a workforce that have actually joined forces and actually use the tools at their disposal effectively, which in our case, we went the Teams route fully. And actually I had a big project this year around this time to roll out Teams. So as you can imagine, it's been a blessing in disguise for me to roll out Teams effectively and get my teams working collaboratively, securely. And I think on top of that, we have taken the opportunity to use the last 6 months as a refresher for all my, you know, all the workforce, namely around, you know, cyber awareness training, you know, running weekly town halls with all staff. Now, they're not being specific around security, but our CEO has been very strict in running weekly town halls from day one. Obviously, as you can appreciate, the summer holiday season kicked in, so I think there's been a bit of a lapse in terms of staff in the office. But I think that has also benefited us and helped, you know, the workforce to become a family unit where they were in the office outside. But I think, you know, on top of that, you know, I think mostly the communication that's come from us, the senior management, the regular reminders has really helped in actually asking staff to be compliant outside and follow the processes. And I think what's also interesting, the mindset of remote working, which pre-COVID-19 was probably never accepted, and during COVID-19, the trust has now been put upon staff to work effectively, which we've seen. So you know, naturally the mindset changes and, you know, the business adapts. So I think generally speaking, we've been very fortunate with the technology that we've rolled out, the awareness campaigns that we've continued with, and naturally the staff have adapted effectively.
Okay, excellent. Mudassar, staying with you, and then I'll go to the other panelists, if I may. Again, everyone used to come to the office, as much as I recall in your case, and then suddenly it was the new norm, right? You've got to now work from remote, right? So and you've touched on it a little, if you can briefly expand on it, what does it mean to have the sudden, yes, we've got to roll out technology, but now we've got to suddenly also secure everyone, not just for now, but ongoing. What did you guys have to do for that?
Yeah, I mean, again, as part of my wider technology rollout, I have been heavily focusing on Microsoft devices as an endpoint for the user. So what we've had a mixture of bring your own device, as you can appreciate, for those staff pre-COVID, and then we also have those that were corporate. Now the reality is we had probably more corporate, less corporate, more BYOD. So we've had, and my mindset in terms of securing the landscape outside of this organization has been to bring everyone onto the same platform. And by doing that, by doing that, it has allowed me to expedite some of the technology rollouts from a security standpoint on a standard platform, rather than having everyone on a bring your own device and a corporate. So to some extent, the technology rollout has facilitated that to allow us to streamline all assets across the business.
Fascinating insight. Angus, if I may come to you, sir, in this challenge of, yes, everyone's got to operate, so you've got to focus on operations first, but then at some point you've got to go, how do I now regularly and keep securing these people, right? May have been slightly easier when everyone was in a location, but now, as we've discussed, we've got 10,000 officers, for example. How did you go about doing that?
I think we were, in a way, fortuitous with the timing, if there is such thing of pandemic event, in that we had identified some major gaps and risks with legacy remote working solutions, and had escalated those to the point where we had pulled the plugs on them just prior, and were rapidly swapping these out with better, more secure and more efficient ways of remotely working, and rolling out MFA everywhere, students, everybody. Now, had pandemic arrived just prior to that, I don't think the risk appetite would have fallen on the let's get rid of the legacy systems. We would have been stuck with them, and we would have been in a very different position. But because we had already identified a number of these areas, and we were already remediating, upping ante on things like authentication, continuous monitoring, conditional access, all those good type of things, that they were either in place or in flight, we had a bit of a head start there. We had a bit like the last comments, where it expedited things far quicker, and we were moving a lot of things on our feet in a way that we would like to have done it in a more controlled and planned rollout. But we were quite fortunate in that respect, where we had got rid of a lot of the legacy risks literally months, weeks even before the pandemic really took hold.
Excellent. Well, that's credit to you and your ability to convince management to listen to you. Well done, sir. And for the management to also, it takes everyone to join the journey.
I have a good team as well, and good seniors who do listen.
No, absolutely. Brilliant. Mahbubul, if I may come to you, and then I'll pose another question, but same question. Operations up and running, everyone's now remote. How have you maintained that balance? But also the next question is, what are you doing about visibility? And then I'll come to the others, right? Visibility. Mark, I'll come to you after this, sir. In terms of visibility and maintaining security. Yeah. Mahbubul, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yeah. I think couple things. I think when you've got a very distributed workforce, which is very dynamic in terms of delivery, doing stuff, collaboration, plus managing operations as well, covering services that needs to be looked at. It can be quite tricky, but at the same time, when you've got 16,000 users or more, different organizations have different numbers of people working for you. Managing IT is quite tricky. So when you're sending out IT, you're forgetting. Normally it's sent to the office and you're collecting it, you're signing stuff off, and you're enrolling people on there. When you have to do it remotely, the whole business process has to start from scratch. So everybody's used to, let's say as an example, putting a thick cable into your laptop and then getting that set up. All of a sudden you're working at home or somewhere else, and you've got to start that journey again. So that's quite tricky. Getting IT out, getting the support out. That is a challenge. Moving in slightly a bit more on how we have done it. We've focused a lot on mobile devices, bring your own devices and stuff like that. And in itself, that causes us a lot more challenges because the level of patching, the level of security on the device itself is not something that we've ever catered for in the past. Now, all of a sudden, we've got to do a sweep on what the assets look like. And if something was to go missing, what's the challenge? What's the opportunity of your data or your services being compromised through that? So those are the things that we were really, really focused on, and we've been very challenged by that. But at the same time, as Angus said, he's got a good team. We've got a good team as well in our organization. IT works now, and it's been a while since I've been in the government department where all our IT is working as it should do. And service is there. So MS Teams is working as an example, without any issues. So it's just those kind of things. We've modernized as an organization, and we started quite early, and then moving towards video court hearings and stuff like that, because that's opportunity that we've taken on, where we can still run our business virtually. So that's in itself where we've ended up. In terms of visibility, I think I'm not sure if you're aware, but I've only been in post for about 10 months, just under 10 months. Mm-hmm. And most of that's been firefighting from March onwards for COVID stuff. So I've not really done anything of my day job that I was supposed to be doing. Or I had all these big plans and all these kind of things to do things in my organization, but I've had to park all of that and focus on running the business, or helping run the business, because that's not my job to run the business, but helping from a security perspective run the business. So my visibility of the team has increased. The visibility of security has increased. Security are now part of the overall picture of technology decisions. And it was there before, but it's now enhanced and it's more focused on it, because when something does go wrong from an incident perspective, we're all over it and we're managing it. So it gave us a bit more. But the main thing is, I will say, a lot of people don't understand how the organization's systems work. And this has given us, most of us that work in security, an ability to understand the business a lot better. So I think from visibility perspective, it's two ways. We learned about the business learned about us in security. So that's what I'd leave at that.
That's really a really good point, actually. And I think many people I've spoken to from my network, and I think all of you hopefully will agree, we'll come to that. But I think the forced transformation, if I may, the forced tweaking has actually encouraged everybody to find out, so how does this work? Rather than just assume someone somewhere, a gremlin is making things work, right? They've now put faces to the humans. Maybe the CEO of large companies now know, oh, I see, it's not just a gremlin, but it's actually people who are doing, this great amount of stuff. Mark, if I may come to you, so you deal with obviously many different kinds of client requirements, but how does one maintain visibility on across their estate? Because the server, the cloud, if I may, the data centers are still there, and one of the biggest challenges, and I hope everyone agrees, but in my experience, one of the biggest challenges is, how do you detect unauthorized change, right? Because that's the early sign of a possible malicious actor tinkering with your system. So can you share your experience in terms of what clients are doing? How are they maintaining this visibility?
Yeah, I mean, as I said at the start, we were already a sort of highly virtualized, virtual team organization ourselves. So, lots of VPNs, lots of remote connectivity, both internally and working with our clients when we're sort of remotely supporting them. We're using all the remote control technologies. But one of the things that came out of it was, I think within our customer base in particular, as well as some new ones, was the notion that there was a rush to open up connectivity to their networks for remote working in a far more widespread and fast way than they'd ever had to do before. And the realization came that with all of that change and with that increasing of effectively the attack surface, the more open you make your systems to remote workers, home workers, you're potentially one slip away from opening it up to the rest of the world. And I think, we started the year with things like Travelex and still the fallout from Equifax, which focused on, vulnerabilities in VPN devices, and I think that was at the back of people's minds. So we've had a lot of kind of catch-up work that we've been doing with our customers to provide that very visibility of the change progression. So an audit trail of who changed what's been changed, and the sort of, the implications of that. So exposing that, which is kind of at the heart of what we do with our technology. It's all about sort of baselining configurations, detecting and exposing changes to it. So it's perfect for, VPN gateways, firewalls, and any of that sort of cloud interconnectivity, which is critical. And I think that in the more open world, it has made people more aware of, we sure we want to do this, and we sure we want to do this in a secure manner. There's more on change control actually in my sort of slot later on. So if that's a point of interest, there's a bit of an explanation about sort of some concepts for doing that. Excellent.
I'll come to you, Angus, and thanks for that, Mark. That's quite insightful, actually. But Angus, on the same topic of visibility, but if I may add another twist to that question, when we run our CIPR course, Incident Planning and Response course, which is certified by the NCSC, one of the things we recommend to everyone is build a trend, right? So the question is, when everyone is working remotely, how is it possible to build a trend easily? Because people may not be reporting stuff. So Angus, if you unmute yourself and then maybe pick up that and the visibility stuff.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's been more of the same, just more of it, in that we have quite a diverse white workforce that's not necessarily been geographically limited. We have, visiting lecturers that travel all over the world. We have overseas students that come and go. We've not been an organisation that's ever been solely focused around just a set of physical premises, so the monitorings, particularly over the last few years, has adapted with that view of the world. The biggest challenge really with protective monitoring is just the sheer volume of information, as it is for most people. And so now we are starting to engage specialist threat hunting services, because best will in the world, yes, I have a great team, but we have to sleep sometimes, we have to do other things, and you miss detail. So I think there's an acknowledgement now with the kind of volumes of data that we should be looking at from a threat perspective. We have to have more eyes on it, and those eyes have to be 24/7. In terms of general change control, change management is bread and butter. It's all, we've always had good ITIL processes. That hasn't changed. Possibly more scrutiny in that people aren't in the same room, so people are checking documents more, that sort of thing. So I don't think that side of it has changed enormously, maybe different focuses, and things like wider threat awareness. The NCSC you mentioned, obviously, are talking more openly now about the threat to higher education, particularly research-based universities, and particularly the ones researching COVID. of which Kings is, a key part of. So that kind of threat perspective has changed some of the focus and things we're looking at for sure. But obviously, there's only so much detail I can go into here about that element.
Absolutely. Angus, thank you so much. Mudassar, if I may come to you, sir. Are people reporting? Do you think they will carry on? Because for you to build a picture of what's happening, right? Because they're now no longer in the office. They can't tap you on the shoulder and go, hey, Mudassar, can you take a look at this, right? So, and how are you maintaining visibility? Because it's now up to me as the end user to raise a ticket, which can be really painful. That's you can put your hands up if you want to, but it can be really painful, right? To raise a ticket, put all the details in, etc., etc. And sometimes I may not bother because it's just, oh, my word crashed when I open a document. Sorry, Mudassar, over to you, sir. How are you going to maintain this, and what are you doing for visibility?
Yeah, again, I think in line with the rollout that we've completed more recently, we've taken the stance of, well, firstly, you've got users working remotely diversely, and that in order to ensure that you're capturing the logs effectively, that user needs to be connected to the VPN at all times. Now, the reality is, are they going to be connected at all times? Probably not. Now, how do you ensure that you capture events and logs remotely without the use of VPN? And how do you ensure that the user's behavior is continued externally, as if it was when you're working in the office? So I think with the use of tools that give us automatic alerts, such as AI or machine learning tools that understands the user behavior in terms of how they are working, that's helped us tremendously in terms of the rollout, especially on the laptops. We have also taken the stance that we need to push logs into our SOC. So we do have an external SOC that monitors our estate internally and externally. So we've had to adapt our SOC to ensure that it's capturing the events for all devices, and that ensures that the events and the logs that would have occurred on the LAN is now outside of the LAN, and that applies to the surfaces. So that has been quite a big jump for us, especially in the last few months, namely with the rollout. Now, as far as staff reporting processes are concerned, I think as far as phishing campaigns, I think the continued awareness that we've done and the general reminders has kept them aware that they need to obviously report on any phishing campaigns, and that's continued. There's not been any major difference there, which is great. Because let's face it, we've seen a large increase of phishing campaigns around COVID-19, very much targeted, and we've seen probably many more fake websites and landing page logins set up over the last 6 months that have made staff more prone to perhaps clicking. But I think the general reporting hasn't changed, and again, I would say just based on the reminders, the constant reminders, and more frequent phishing campaigns that we're running with a follow-up to staff to remind them, well, actually, this was us, and actually that one was a fake. So that's been very beneficial to us. But I think, as I said, it's become a far more challenge. We've begun to adopt far more cloud solutions, because let's face it, these laptops are solely cloud-first connections, and if you can bypass a VPN and have connections or monitoring alerts or logs being pushed into the cloud, then you're guaranteed to capture an event as of when it occurs at that given time. And again, with the rollouts that we've done, we've focused heavily on compliance policies around that.
Excellent. That's brilliant. A question to you, and I'll come to the other panelists also. Do you reckon, and in your opinion, that the pandemic, the forced transformation, has convinced management, they may have not done it yet, but it has convinced them that they need more visibility? Am I making sense in my question?
Agreed. And I think it's given the management an opportunity to fast track many other opportunities that they may have had. I mean, let's face it, the technology rollout that I planned, which was going to take 18 months, I've probably rolled out in 6 months. So So actually, you know, and I must admit, I've never had a beard before as well. So that plays a key part in terms of demonstrating how much work we've had to put in, especially my team, over the last 6 months to get us with a cloud first adoption with laptops. And I also took an opportunity in the last 6 months to have a board engagement, you know, around a workshop around the table to make them slightly more aware. So again, slightly unusual having it over Teams, but it worked. But it gives us an opportunity to, you know, in all aspects of IT, security, you name it, to think ahead, fast track, and also consider what the office will look like in the future, and whether flexible working will become a norm, which I'm sure will become a norm for many others. So this change that we're adopting is extremely important, whether it's for now or for later.
Yes, and I'm sure you can tell everyone you and I work together on talking to the board on MS Teams.
Yeah,
So thank you for that, Mudassar. Yes. Mahbubul, if I may come to you, do you think hopefully the question in terms of, has the pandemic led management to agree and acknowledge that they need more visibility across, you know, the IT estate, where maybe in the past it may not have been possible?
Yes. So simple answer. I think, you know, as one of my old mentors used to say, why do we have breaks? Is to be able to go faster, not to slow down. And that's where the organization has gone in terms of, if we want something done, we want it done yesterday. And knowing what's out there, what technology is out there, what could be done better, quicker, faster, and that will give us the business outcomes and benefits that we want. So that's given us a bit of traction. It's also given us a bit of momentum as well, to get things really done quickly. And at the same time, they're involved in more things, more decisions. I think normally decisions would be made very, you know, as you said, gremlins would make the decisions, and they would know about these people. But now they've like, oh, okay, we've got to make those decisions because we've got to spend £500,000. I'm just using it as an example, right? It could be £1 million or whatever it is, X millions of pounds. I've got to make that decision, because if I do make that decision, the opportunities are going to be greater. So the visibility of that is a lot greater now. They're getting involved in key decisions. They want to get involved as well, as opposed to in the past they probably had other things to do, which was in their business areas, whatever that may be. So senior colleagues are more interested in making sure things are ready, because they got a lot of pressure. Without, you know, depending what part of the business you're in, if you're client facing and you're making money out of, you know, servicing, if people are not using your service, you've got no money, therefore you have no business. So it's in their interest to start getting things done. Same thing if you're public service, if people are not able to use a service, all of a sudden focus is straight from the top, from cabinet ministers and everything along that line. So it does cause a lot of pressure on senior leaders, and therefore they get involved because it's got to be done pretty quick. So I've seen a shift, and it's a positive shift. I think, will it go back to what it used to? That's the question, and I hope it doesn't. I hope it continues going fast, and we embrace technology and solutions and security in a better way to let us do as a business what we need to do to evolve.
Excellent, and long may it continue. And an acknowledgement to all the teams that work for all of you. It's a given that without good people, you know, no one is going to be ever successful. So, and also acknowledgement to the management, who are actually getting a bit more involved, which is good, because they need to ask those questions. They've always needed to, but now they are actually asking the questions. Angus, if I may come to you, sir, in your opinion, would you, and I know you are doing quite a lot of this already, but do you think that this forced kind of a situation that we've all been kind of put into has further enhanced and changed the perspectives for them for management that you report to go, you know what, we need to keep monitoring?
Yes, I believe it has. I'd echo most of the comments already made, and you know, the last analogy about the brakes are there to allow you to go faster with confidence. I think it's quite an important one. But I think the timing's been right, where there's a better awareness around breaches, cyber risk as well. And with this newfound reliance on the digital services and the availability of those resources, it would only take one major breach or incident that's going to have even more catastrophic effects. So I think that message is starting to be acknowledged now, and visibility is a key part of that at all levels. At the soft level of promotion of people reporting anomalies, not being frightened to come forward and be proactive in that sense, but also in this sort of background protective monitoring sense as well, and the investments that need to be made in that.
Excellent. Thank you for that, sir. Mark, if I may come to you, Mark, very briefly, and actually on the cloud, and many panelists here, in fact, all of them have mentioned for the need to go to the cloud, the infrastructure cloud, the Microsoft Azure, the good old 3 or 4 kind of household names, AWS, Google. Now, the challenge with that, Mark, is this whole dynamic nature, correct? The fact that you can spin up, as they call it, an instance, serve the client, serve the need, and then go back to sleep almost, right? How does one implement change, not management, but change visibility? Change management, ITIL's been going on. Whoever named ITIL, we need to have a word with them, but you know what I mean, right? I mean, the point in change management has been going on with many organizations. It's relatively mature, but this change visibility, when something malicious changes, would I know, and that's the question. How does one do that in the cloud rather than just the good old data center? Over to you, Mark.
Yeah, we've been doing lots more of this on both sort of hosted solutions, our monitoring technology, and monitoring the stuff that's either in the cloud or being migrated to cloud. The benefits are clear, but there's added layers of configuration. So typically it's Kubernetes or whatever the AWS parallels are for controlling what those container services look like when they're actually launched, how they expand, when they collapse back. And there's a lot more emphasis in that type of environment to focus in on the images, the image promotion, the configuration of the orchestration of containers. And that's where we're directing our efforts. It's been interesting because as organizations have been migrating to cloud, and they all say the same thing, that it's digital transformation, it's going to simplify things, it's going to open up platforms either on premises, hybrid, or in the cloud. And yet in the sort of organizations we deal with, which are typically sort of, Fortune 5,000 enterprise businesses, they've still got all their legacy systems as well. They're often not replacing entirely. They're just adding on more complexity via cloud systems. So it's a big challenge, but it's one that we've sort of adapted to. We're actually in a pretty good place for controlling configurations, regardless of whether it's traditional platform or cloud orchestration. Same rules apply. Get a baseline, harden configuration settings, and then track changes from that. Oh, I think we got you on mute, Amar. Hello.
Oh, have you someone unmuted me? Sorry, I was talking. Is it relatively straightforward to do? Is change visibility easy to do in a dynamic environment, because it's constantly changing?
Yeah, I mean, traditionally, not sort of change control as a security control has sort of got a bad rep because of the benefits are clear, but the side effects, the sort of change noise and the management overhead. But that's all changed now. What we do is we provide, and I talk about this later actually, but if you're smart about it, lots of automation, harnessing different sources of knowledge about what changes are expected, what they should look like in terms of sort of blueprinting. So, the classic thing is patching. So when you roll out patches, if you pre-stage patches, you kind of know what those patches are going to look like when they're rolled out onto the estate. Now, if you're smart about it, you can capture that. You can do some learning of what that image is going to look like. And then as it hits the estate, then you can verify and validate that those patches have been deployed and sort of get rid of those. So what's left is just the change that wasn't expected and wasn't planned. And within that will be any breach activity or unexpected, undesirable. So yeah, with with smart automation, which has got this sort of intelligent learning, then it becomes practical, even on really large scale environments.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that, sir. Sadly, time doesn't wait for anyone. I think that's one constant on the planet Earth with 24-hour cycle. Maybe when we move to Mars with Mr. Musk, it might be different. Angus, in your I guess it's one question, but with a couple of options there. Is this an opportunity to tweak the CISO role, or the Chief Information Scapegoat Officer, or the Chief Blame Officer, as we call all ourselves? You know, I've been one many times. I think, in my opinion, CISO should have been called Information Assurance Officer. You know, you're giving the assurance rather than just security. But the role that you're doing, do you feel that this is an opportunity that you have tweaked it, and do you think it's going to give you importance? Is a wrong word, because it's not about being important, but that mandate to constantly improve and drive a better assurance? Am I making sense, Angus? Angus?
Yes, you are. I think that's
okay.
Sorry. Audible? Yeah.
Yes, you are, sir. You are now. Yes.
You hearing me okay now? Or?
Yeah, we got you. We got you, Angus.
Okay,
yeah, you're here.
The United States wakes up at this time and my broadband slows.
But, that Cornish internet, yeah.
Yeah, I think we're on that journey. We're on that journey anyway. I don't know if I'm audible or not.
Oops. Angus, I'll come back to you, sir. I'll come back to you. That's okay. I'll come back to you, sir. Mahbubul, if I may come to you, if you unmute, sir. And the question is very similar. Mahbubul, do you think, and in your experience and your opinion in this last 6 months, has that the role of the blame officer or the CISO, the information security officer, ignoring the actual title, but do you think it's actually given you that mandate and the importance?
To be quite frank, yes, I think it's given me a bit more control. So I know we talked about Chief Information Blame Officer, right? And Chief Information Sandwich Officer, whatever you want to call it, right? That's what we used to be, chocolate teapots versus real teapots. That's where we were. But in the last 6 months, I've actually worked with various parts of the business to bring security under one place. So it doesn't really matter if it's cyber, information security, information assurance, whatever you want to call it. Dictionary definitions, thesaurus will say the same thing, right? It's security. So the whole of security, with the exception of physical security, is covered by my team now, and all of us are working towards the same goals and objectives and strategy. You got shadow IT, shadow security that goes on in organizations that are building stuff quickly. Software houses do that a lot. I mean, government is a big, massive software house as a thing. So what it's given me is an opportunity to start. I wouldn't say seize power as such, but I think it's start saying, look, I'm accountable for security. It's in my job description. I will get the sack, and if I'm going to get the sack, I'm going to be accountable for everything in security. So everything should be done through my teams, right? And there's a lot of collaboration between technology colleagues, and it's important to know that security is one part of CISO's. One part is security, the other part is technology colleagues, the CTOs, the chief architects, all those kind of colleagues are in that space. You've got to have a better relationship with them. So whilst you got your own accountability, you got your peer leadership activities you have to do with other colleagues in other parts of the business. So it's taking control, but
Excellent.
also you're not taking over everything, but you're actually taking ownership. People don't like to own things. It's always somebody else's problem.
Excellent.
And I think if the role changes, it changes to the fact that you're going to do stuff yourself.
Mahbubul, thank you so much. Angus, I know you were saying the US colleagues and etc. are now flooding your network with TCP/IP packets, legitimate ones.
Something like that.
So just to rephrase it, just to come back with that question, Mahbubul, thank you for that. The question is, do you think the chief blame officer, the chief information security officer role, in your case, your role, and importance is the wrong word, I understand, but maybe has it got the mandate that may have not been there earlier, but moving forward, it definitely has a strong mandate and backing? Oops.
Yeah, I mean, in this particular sector, it's a fairly new thing anyway. And we've been on I think, a positive journey for the past couple of years or so, where security wasn't even on the radar in the same way that corporates or governments or other sectors I've worked in. It's still a very new thing in terms of that visibility at all within the educational sector. It's improving massively. I think it was before the pandemic anyway. Whether that's affected it is hard to say, because it was already starting to get that kind of level of understanding of the sort of board level view that cybersecurity is one of the main risks that they should be thinking about, should be managing, and that we should be investing in that and having prominent leaders in that field as we would with any other business process. The term CISO, Chief Information Officer, one vastly overused, as we're all aware. There's all sorts of people who call themselves CISOs now who don't sit on boards. I don't sit on a board as such, but I'm, responsible for pushing forward the boundaries of where security is going within a sector where, say, it's not quite as linear, and we have to accept that there will be what's traditionally known as shadow IT, with autonomous entities, faculties needing to have that space to do so. And it's how we enable that with the other things we need to be securing. So zero trust architectures, those type of concepts are making much more sense going forward than maybe some of the old, more compliance perimeter-based views of security. But it's on the right direction, without a doubt. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks for that insight. Mudassar, over to you. And sadly, we are running out of time. David Cass, Federal Reserve New York VP. We're gonna bring him on in a minute, but we're sadly almost done with this hour. But Mudassar, over to you. Do you think you've got more mandate? I know. I mean, we're actually really fortunate. I think the tide is changing. Everybody over here has had massive management support, without which you cannot move forward. And Mudassar, you too have always had that. What are your thoughts on this, Mudassar?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that I've been very fortunate to have had the support from my management. I think if I kind of paint a picture pre-COVID-19, staff were given an option to complete a survey, and the survey highlighted some key requirements. And some of those were, flexible working, more work from home offerings. And naturally, the COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated the ability for staff to work effectively from home securely. And naturally, the implementation of the technology that we've put into Microsoft, using the cloud and pushing Intune policies across all estates with a single device, has allowed us to very much fast track support a business strategy, along with the requirements that, in order to secure the estate remotely, and also provide the flexibility to ensure that staff can communicate effectively from home. So for me, I think I am very fortunate that the strategy that I had planned has been supported effectively to really fast track much of what we wanted to complete. But I think at the same time, the cloud has always been a big step for Waverton and myself, and I think we've taken the opportunity to really use the cloud to push the compliance policies to the device. Less reliance on premises, on servers on premises, and use Intune, use Microsoft, and use the compliance policies to ensure that the staff members can't do things that they shouldn't do. But I think at the same time, it's creating a baseline across the business. So you have one standard across the business rather than having a mixture of variety of assets and devices. So yeah, it's been no doubt a very fortunate opportunity for us at Waverton. Upon which, obviously, when the office does reopen at some point, we continue operating in this new role.
Yeah, I'll come and grab those biscuits once.
We've got new policies in place.
They do really good biscuits, folks. I'm just kidding. They do a lot of other good stuff also. The time is running out. There's some questions, but sadly, we may not be able to answer them. I'll start with you, Mudassar. Less than 60 seconds, final thoughts, then to Angus, Mahbubul, and then Mark. Go, Mudassar, you first.
Well, I would say that during this COVID-19 pandemic, it's extremely important that you stay in touch with your staff. I mean, the reality is you've got diverse locations, you've got people working from homes, on the floor, from what I've heard as well. But the reality is that if you don't keep in touch with your staff and keep that collaboration open using your tools that you have at your disposal, such as Teams, then obviously it makes it far more difficult. Keep the communication going from a security standpoint, and from my perspective, that has helped tremendously.
Excellent, thank you. I know, yeah. Sorry, Mudassar, thank you. I know Mudassar and Angus got to have a hard stop. Angus, over to you, sir. If you unmute yourself and give us your final, thank you.
I think be prepared, because we ain't seen nothing yet. Whilst the pandemic has been challenging, I think what's to come next is going to be even more challenging in terms of the economic downturn. We're talking about the biggest recession meaningfully recorded at a time when you already got a exponential growth in the both volumes and capabilities of cyber criminals. And at the same time, you're probably going to see, in a lot of cases, security budget staff even reduced, and this perfect storm scenario coming. I mean, thankfully, I'm an organisation where nobody involved in those type of things has been furloughed, and security has remained a priority. But to force that message that the pandemic has been challenging, but I think the economic downturn to follow is going to be even more challenging from a security perspective.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Mahbubul, I'm going to come to you. Keep in touch. Be prepared. Angus, Mudassar, it's been a real pleasure. Mahbubul, same to you. But your last 60 seconds, if you two want to drop off whenever you're ready, thanks again, and we'll be in touch again. Mahbubul, your 60 seconds, sir.
So I've got just two things, or three things. First thing is focus on cyber incident response planning and management and training in that space. That's one thing I would always recommend, especially during this kind of period, because we're in crisis management, different type, but still crisis management. Developing your staff and people within your organization, I think, is important still. So never don't forget that, including non-security people. And as a CISO, make sure you got the money to do your job. Funding is important. Without money, you can't deliver anything in security. So just keep an eye on those three things, I think. That will be my last thing. Obviously, other people have made very valuable comments already, so there's nothing I could add to that.
Mahbubul Islam, Angus Macrae, and Mudassar Ulhaq. Mark, I'm going to come to you, sir, and Mark casually. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much. We're going to switch over to David Cass from the US Federal Reserve. But otherwise, guys, and thank you so much, and I'll be in touch again. Thank you. Mark, your final comment.
That was great.
Okay.
Yeah, final comment. I mean, don't overlook security. It's a very fluid environment, but we can beat security with new approaches that are there, and it can be done. You don't need to be a sitting duck for an attack.
Excellent, Mark. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much, folks. Just to be clear, David Cass, he lives in the US, around the East Coast. He could not make it today, so we actually had to urgently do a bit of a recording with him. Still very, very useful. Actions and a click action, share a media. Lulu, I don't have any media, but it should be there soon. Lulu. Maybe Lulu, you can join in and share the media.
Hello, how are you? Okay, I'm just about to share David's presentation.
Okay. Greetings and welcome. I'm really happy to be joined by a very good friend of mine who is in the US, in New York, David Cass. David, welcome. And over to you to introduce who you are, what you do, and establish your experience.
Amar, always a pleasure. My name is David Cass. I am the Vice President of Cyber and IT Risk for the Federal Reserve Supervision Unit. So I'm essentially a regulator. So any opinion I express today is my own opinion and doesn't represent that of the Federal Reserve or the Federal Reserve System. Thanks, Amar. Happy to join you.
Absolutely, sir. But your own opinion is still extremely valuable and respected. David, so listen, I'm going to use a couple of words that people are used to, but it's your opinion that I think that really matters. It's needless to say the pandemic has changed the world. It's an understatement, I guess. It's changed our world. It's changed I think it's touched every human being on the planet is the best way to put it, right? And it's changed the way we are working. I mean, you're working from home. I'm working from home. I think almost everybody's working from somewhere other than their kind of stipulated office. So to get straight into your opinion, has the security landscape, the challenges that you're facing, it's changed, but if you can share with us from your opinion how it's changed.
Oh, sure. So, I mean, it always gets back to the point of view of, as a CISO or as a security professional, reassessing kind of the current, environment every so often so you don't get complacent. So I think, COVID, is clearly a good example of, as we were talking about earlier, whereas, even if you were used to managing multiple sites as a CISO of a large organization, now, that's exponentially changed based on the number of your employees from that perspective. But it still gets back to some of the, basic blocking and tackling. So now maybe where you had 50 locations, now maybe you have 5,000, depending upon, how many employees you have. But it goes back to, some of the fundamentals again. What are you doing from a training security awareness for your employees so they don't fall prey to all the rampant phishing attacks that are out there, now that they're working from home. What do you do from a point of view of now it's, back to being about the endpoint, in the rush to get everybody home. Did you put golden images on these laptops that you provided to your employees? Did you not? How do you manage them? How do you patch it? Because, patching in a corporate campus is much easier than patching remote locations where bandwidth can be a challenge in different geographies and things like that. And looking at, really getting back to, how do you keep those, endpoints up to date, from that point of view.
Excellent. Yes. I mean, as we were just discussing before we started, before we kind of went live, if you may have had 50 offices and 10,000 employees, for an example, but now you have 10,000 offices, and locations that you have to now suddenly be able to monitor. I mean, in your experience, your opinion, what you are seeing, have organizations, on a good day, visibility was really interesting, right? But now that there are 10,000 offices, for example, for an organization, what happens to the visibility?
So I think that's an important factor. So, obviously I deal with highly regulated, institutions. And, again, whether you're highly regulated or not highly regulated, anytime you either choose to outsource anything or make those corporate decisions, you can outsource anything, but you can never outsource accountability. So it's understandable that probably in the rush to get everybody home, that organizations had to make some trade-offs between how tightly they could monitor things and maybe how quickly they could patch things. So hopefully that's made that onto a risk register somewhere. But now that we're 6+ months, into this, or at least I think we're 6 months into it, that, now you need to make sure that those things are actually getting addressed on the register. How are you getting, better visibility? How are you monitoring employees? You may have had to change technologies or things like that. If you have traders or highly regulated employees working from home where transactions are expected to be recorded and tightly monitored, okay, so maybe there was a short window where there was a gap, but the key thing is, we're past that short window now. So now organizations should be taking efforts to make sure that they're getting the right visibility.
Absolutely. I think that's what I was telling another client, David, a few days ago. There are no more excuses, right? I think there was a grace period in the first few months, maybe. I think many people have used accelerated digital transformation, but that grace period is probably over. But coming to that ban, I mean, I think it's an interesting word, the digital transformation, right? Everyone's had to drop focus on everything else and get their employees up and running. But how bad or severe, rather, has the impact of forced transformation? What impact has it had on security projects? Am I making sense in my question?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple ways to look at it. I mean, the old rule of security was never waste a good crisis. From a point of view to get lessons learned or help get things driven on your security program. But I think again with the rush home or with what's changed, it's really looking at did you have the capability to monitor beforehand? Do you need the capability now? In some cases, it's also what's old is new again. Identity, can you really measure, do you have good identity management and access management, from that point of view? And I'd say, transformation is definitely one of those buzzwords, but it depends upon, what are you trying to do as an organization? In some cases, the use of cloud has increased from the point of view that now all of a sudden with getting all these people home, needing to access tools and things like that, they may or may not have. So maybe that's, an accelerator for transformation. Other organizations are seeing it from a point of view of, maybe they're moving to the cloud or adopting these other new technologies from the point of view that maybe they have a big, legacy amount of technology debt and they're looking to get out of that. So I'd say, digital transformation is one of those kind of tricky words from the point of view that you really need to look at it from the business perspective of, what are you trying to do for your business? Is it, deal with your legacy technology debt? Is it, new technology that you want to get closer to your customers? But, anytime there's transformation, it has to be embarked on with, what's the goal at the end?
No, excellent. And, one more thing comes to mind, David. Change, the idea of detecting change early, right? I mean, I know unauthorized change is one of the biggest headaches, right? Now, when we were all in the office, it was still a massive problem, the whole issue of who has made an unauthorized change, because that's kind of one of the early signs of malicious activity, right? How does one, I mean, I know there are many answers to this, but I want your opinion on this. How does one go about in this completely now disparate kind of 10,000 people world? If someone has 10,000 offices now, they're still making changes, they're still upgrading software, etc., etc. How does one start to get their head around and manage this headache?
Well, I mean, I think it's a good time to kind of revisit your governance around change management in general, because, in general, you should really look at it from the point of view of, do you have the ability to prevent unauthorized changes? And that can be through your change management system of, whether it's tickets getting opened, the traceability, the right approvals, from that point of view, or, also do you have the ability to detect unauthorized changes from that camp too, where if something happens and the state of the system changes, do you have the ability to kind of find out what happened and where that went? So I'd say, now that everybody's distributed, you really have to, look at how does your governance change around that, because you can still have good change management governance in place, but you have to look at, how has it changed? Do you have the right levels of accountability? Did you have to change anything because you pushed everybody home so quickly? But I'd say, the step one is revisit the governance around that, and then you can see, do those processes still hold up?
I mean, that's perfectly a brilliant kind of approach to do it.
So I'd say, the first thing is, as you embark on, digital transformation, understand from the point of view that it's more than the buzzword. So what is the goal that's trying to be achieved from that point of view? And then, as a security professional, make sure you're not complacent. Security programs get put in place and then they tend to just, continue to run. from that point of view with only minor improvements. Anytime you have anything, whether it's like, pandemic or whether it's a major transformation project, you really have to reevaluate, the information security program to make sure that you have the right capabilities, the right skill set, the right monitoring, and just going to cloud in general is a good example. Whereas it's transformational technology, but it fundamentally changes business process. It changes the way security has to operate. Now, all of a sudden, you need a much tighter coupling with whoever your cloud services provider is. You need a shared responsibility model. So part of it is, as you embark on these big transformations, really reevaluate your security program to make sure that all the fundamental building blocks of the security program, whether it's identity and access management, whether it's governance, anytime it's a step change in technology, there is going to be an impact on these programs, and you have to look at it and determine, am I equipped for it? Do I have the right skill set? Do I have the right budget? How do I train and transform my people? Cloud's a good example from that point of view that, moving to where, within information security, you can have highly specialized areas, whether it's application security, infrastructure security. Moving to cloud means now all of a sudden your infrastructure security personnel need to understand scripting. They need to understand JSON. They need to understand Perl. They need to understand things that have never traditionally been part of their wheelhouse. And then as you move to like DevOps, you have to look at, well, how do I get security embedded into these operations? Because the pace that we're moving will no longer tolerate each individual application going for an 8 to 10 week information security review. So these are all things that have to, really cause programs to have to fundamentally be reevaluated. And, step changes in technology, whether it's cloud, whether it's blockchain, or AI, have a profound impact on how the business operates too. So it's not just looking at the security processes; it's looking at how are the business process going to change to make sure that that's captured as well.
Okay, that's pretty amazing. Thank you, David. It's really been insightful. I mean, I know we could carry on and on, but I think this captures in a very concise manner pretty much what people should be doing and what's the impact of digital transformation, but also what people should be doing in the future, because I don't think the future is going to be static. The future is going to be extremely dynamic, to say the least. Whatever happens to the pandemic, I don't think the world is going to be the same as it was in January 2020. David, it's been a real pleasure. Lulu, do you have anything else?
No, I think that was very insightful, as Amar said, David. So, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your insights. Much appreciated.
Oh, no worries. Happy to help out. Amar knows I can talk pretty much all day.
David Cass from New York, dialing in early in the morning. Thank you so much.
Amar, thank you. Always happy to join you. Take care.
Thank you. Okay, folks, that was me. Lulu was there too, but that was a recording we had to do yesterday because David Cass, he sends his apologies. He could not make it for today's live session because of some other issue at work. Lulu, over to you.
Yeah,
I think
we've got Mark Kedgley now, CTO at NewNet Technologies. So we'll just get the presentation prepared for Mark. You just hold 2 seconds.
Okay, and that brings us to the next presentation in today's Securing Digital Transformation event. I'm going to give you a 5-second warning now. If you have any children in the room with you, please cover their eyes. Anybody else, please don't look directly at the screen because I'm just about to put my camera on briefly, but for everybody left on the session, hi, I'm Mark Kedgley. I'm the CTO at NewNet Technologies. Thanks very much for attending today. I hope you're going to find the presentation informative and useful. And any questions, please fire those in via the chat function, and we'll get round to all of those during the roundtable segment at the end. Otherwise, you'll be glad to know that I'm going to turn the camera off for the rest of the presentation so we can concentrate on the visuals. But thanks again for your time. Okay, so just before we get into the meat of the presentation, just want to tell you a little bit about NNT. What we do at NNT, we're the leading provider of what we call secure ops. Now, this is all about taking those essential foundational security controls, which all the leading security frameworks agree on as being essential for an effective cybersecurity strategy, but we then overlay them with the operational discipline of change management. Now, in particular, what we talk about is change control, which is a well-known security best practice, but one that's kind of got a bit of a bad rep because whilst super effective and valuable, the problem that has dogged change control has been the need to manage the side effects, the change noise, the false positives. So what NFT have done is to revolutionize the effectiveness of this control, and the way that we do this is through our use of what we call intelligent plan change technology. This means that every change is analyzed and then assessed using a variety of sources of knowledge. So we use things like file reputation data or previously observed patterns of change behavior, and even factor in things like expected scheduled changes through integration with ITSM systems. What this does, it allows changes to be categorized by risk and means that genuine security threats like ransomware incursions are prioritized clearly. Now, the promise of all this is by ensuring you have these prescribed essential security controls in place and combined with the ability to correlate changes with a change manifest or intelligent rules, you can genuinely prevent and protect against all forms of breach, as well as gaining full control of changes for operational peace of mind. Currently, there's about 500 customers, primarily in the global enterprise sector of the market. Here's just a quick few of them, so you're in good company. Okay, so I know we're under attack from a far more deadly invisible enemy at the moment. Stay safe, everybody, far from out of the woods yet, but all of us are under attack from another unseen enemy at all times, and usually one that remains unseen until it's too late. Cyber attacks are relentless, continue to score big hits on some of the world's largest businesses and some of the world's best resourced businesses. So something is still going wrong in terms of our ability to defend against attack and to detect breaches when they do happen. Now, like the current COVID-19 pandemic, when we had the WannaCry ransomware outbreak in 2017, it was also a truly global attack. It swept the world in just a few hours, claimed something like 230,000 victims in over 150 countries. And those that were hit, it was agony and disruption for corporate and home users right around the world. And as with the current coronavirus spread, it's only a matter of time before we get another worldwide attack as devastating. And next time, it could be even worse. I'm in the UK and it shut down hospitals here. Imagine if that had coincided with the COVID infections at their peak when we had hospitalisations sort of going through the roof here. And, if we had a hospital shut down then back in May, what would have been the consequences of that? Now, at the time, I was thinking, well, at least there'll be some good that comes out of WannaCry because we've now got a worldwide understanding of the seriousness of cyber attacks, and it was front and center for everybody, and we would get our act together and start to tackle the problem of cyber attack. But attacks are still landing. Some of the headlines up the top, as I mentioned. So what's going wrong? It isn't necessarily just due to apathy or a lack of appetite to tackle the problem. There's something more deep-seated and more fundamental that has to be addressed. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the things that are behind this. Now, ironically, since cybersecurity, it's seen as one of the fastest moving, the most innovative sectors for IT, and I'm saying this as a vendor myself. There is an argument to say that it's actually lagging behind. The breach stats certainly don't give an especially great picture of cybersecurity vendors having won the war or even competed yet. And just going back to sort of WannaCry, the real killer with it was that it just wasn't detected early enough. And similarly, in this current fight against COVID-19, a lot of emphasis has been placed on the need for test, track, and trace approaches, so that we're going to get outbreaks, but when we do, if we know about them early enough, we can isolate them. If we know who's likely to have been in contact, we can trace them, we can test them, and effectively, put up a fire break around the spreaders of the disease. And that's a great way of damping down and ultimately, stamping out the major threat, the major peaks in infection, because this thing spreads so quickly. And the same rules apply to cyber breaches. If we had better early detection and containment, that's all critical in terms of limiting the depth of any incursion and the opportunity for data theft or disruption. And that's key because latest data, if you read, Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report, they're still saying that metrics like, the time to detect for a breach still up around 160 days, months and months, while, the time for theft, exfiltration of data, it's usually within the first few hours or days of a breach being successful. And unfortunately, one of the realities is that, IT operational technologies are moving faster than cybersecurity. Microservices, containers, it's all making IT progression faster than ever, while the technologies and processes or controls we rely on for security are, let's say, they're not to be rushed. But there's no stopping this. Container-centric computing offers too many benefits to ignore, and most analysts are forecasting that there's going to be very few organisations that won't be using these highly rapid and agile container-deployed applications. In fact, I think the Gartner predictions by 2022, over 75% of global organisations are going to be running containerised applications in production. Why is this happening? Well, containers allow us to wring out the maximum delivered performance for applications and, give us even more flexibility of platform choice, even the things like, AWS and Azure clearly. And all of this means that we're getting more and more variables in an expanding IT portfolio and a whole new set of configuration data sets to control and secure as we approach the software-defined world. So more choices, more options, and for most it's incremental. Very few organisations, particularly in the enterprise space, will have anything like the luxury to just throw away the legacy infrastructure and applications. So these are going to be retained and still has to be secured, as well as all the newer cloud container infrastructure. This is typical across all of the organisations that we're dealing with. They're actually ending up with more to manage. So even though the future is a more sort of ultra flexible cloud-based IT, the reality today is that most enterprise IT organisations are still so dependent on legacy applications and platforms, and they all carry very different security requirements. Now, in contrast to all of this, to this sort of agile, super flexible container world, take something like a vulnerability scan. Typically this is going to take hours. So, usually you're doing these things out of hours to avoid impacting business services. They get delayed to quiet times overnight or at the weekend. And, for most organisations, we're running scans once a month at most. There's other factors too. So, the notion of maintaining configuration standards or standardising on a baseline, very much at odds with the sort of fluidity of contemporary IT strategies using, cloud and container platforms. And again, container-based, Kubernetes world gives us even more configuration data to control and secure. But, in spite of all this, it's encouraging that the security controls mandated by, NIST, PCI, CIS, among others, they're still very much fit for purpose. But operating them to keep pace, let alone get out in front of IT operations, is where automation and technology is going to play an even bigger part. The most critical of all in terms of giving most bang for buck is what we touched on earlier, change control. By operating this right at the centre of business as usual IT processes and done well, it not only allows security standards to be maintained, but is going to give us a big advantage in that all too crucial early breach detection. Okay, so this is where we come on to, really the difference between change management and change control. Traditional change management, like this illustration here, it's really flawed. It's easily bypassed. The level of scrutiny on the implemented changes is usually minimal. while there is QA testing and processes like, the post-implementation review, usually this amounts to, is it still working? And the more detailed analysis of security defenses, have we introduced vulnerabilities? Have we violated, have we drifted away from our secure baseline? It doesn't really come into it. We leave that to the monthly scan. And of course, if there isn't any visibility or scrutiny of known expected changes, then, there's going to be little or no awareness of unplanned, unexpected changes, including breach activity. They're all going to be hidden, effectively in plain sight, just buried in the soup of regular changes, business as usual change that's going on. So let's compare that with the world of closed loop change control, where there are actually some extra crucial steps being introduced. And you might say, well, wait, what? More bureaucracy. It's already overburdened. It's never going to work. Well, the cool thing here is that these extra steps are highly automated and designed to be pretty much unseen. Also, they work in any order. So even though we've illustrated this kind of serial step-by-step process, the critical automated analysis and verification of changes that really makes the difference. It's what helps us cut out the change noise. It's what allows us to present changes according to risk. That can work either preemptively or after the event. So, for example, scenario one, if you're a sort of more mature organisation with an ITSM system, Remedy or ServiceNow, for example, then you'll have a change management process where an RFC is submitted, change advisory board reviews and approves it, changes get timetabled and implemented. Now, in this standard way, most change is generated by patching. So if you're an organisation that tests patches in a pre-deployment setup, the changes that result from the patching can be captured and then used as what we call a change manifest. It's a blueprint of what happens when this patch is rolled out. That change manifest can then be used to power what we call an intelligent plan change. So as changes are made, they're tracked and analysed for a match. And the beauty of this is that we get the surety that changes happening are accurate and as planned, and really big payoff, correspondingly any unmatched remaining changes, they get highlighted for review as security incidents. Any unexpected change is potentially bad. Now, alternatively, scenario two, if you're thinking, this won't work for us, we just get too much unplanned change, for all the usual reasons, then the same process I just outlined still works kind of in reverse. All changes are recorded anyway, and in the absence of any change manifest or intelligent plan change rules, they just default to unplanned changes. However, the intelligence and knowledge can then be added retrospectively to our change control system as changes are reviewed. So as we do, all historical changes can also be reassessed for a match. So in that patching scenario where we have hundreds or thousands of devices all receiving the same patches, this means that as soon as we review one device, that knowledge can then be multiplied across the whole estate. So we see the same patch, the same pattern of changes happening hundreds of times. All of those changes can be wiped out in one fell swoop, and what's left over is the really important, the really unplanned, the unexpected change, which in the worst case will also include the breach activity that we're looking to identify as early as possible. So in summary, we want to adopt a test, track and trace approach to cybersecurity. By extension of this analogy, we've got plenty of vaccines against known threats by way of system hardening and patches to defend and protect systems from attack. But as with the COVID-19 virus, when we get a new vulnerability and a zero-day threat, we have no way to automatically protect systems. And this is why change control is so important as part of your cybersecurity control framework. But what we want to do is automate the analysis and review of changes as they're detected and give ourselves as close to a real-time breach detection capability, which is going to be essential if we're going to get out in front of contemporary ransomware and more pervasive breaches. The key is to assimilate knowledge of what is expected and what is approved, and this means leveraging trusted sources such as, the ITSM system for details of planned changes, using change manifests to blueprint change patterns, and even, file reputation data for known good or whitelisted file changes, so we can further isolate the 0-day or new threats that may incurse our systems. And it really does work. Operation of intelligent change control will allow you to maintain a reduced attack surface as much for those container and cloud systems as for legacy applications, critical for mitigating attacks. It's also going to ensure that only accurate, intended and desirable changes are made, which is great for operational integrity and quality service delivery. And that's before you get to the really big payoff, which is that any breach activity is going to be exposed before damage is done. And that concludes this section. So thanks very much for listening. Hope there's been some interesting ideas there and some concepts you'll want to revisit. Any questions, please fire those in and we'll attempt to cover those in the roundtable discussion later. But in the meantime...
I hope you can hear me.
Thank you so much, Mark Kedgley, and thank you, Amar. We're just going to quickly open it up for questions. Just very conscious of time. We've had a couple of questions come through.
Sorry, were you going to read them out, Lulu, or me?
Yeah, are you okay to read out those questions?
No, that's fine. I mean, I think your presentation was to the point, Mark. You know, I had a couple of questions I was going to interrupt you. One of the questions is, how easy is it to roll out? Am I making sense in the question? That's what I read. It says, how easy is it to put it out into implementation?
Yeah, and I think that this is coloured by people who may have tried to operate sort of change control in the past and found that it's harder than it looks. With what we've described there, this sort of intelligent change rules, because we're using this mixture of strategies, so we're either using the, I don't know if I made it clear, but the change manifest concept where, you know, we observe changes, then when we see repeated instances of those same patterns, we can equally say, well, look, we know what they are. They're this patch being rolled out. They're expected, they're known, they're okay, they're good. And with the right technology, you can automate that process to recognize even, you know, millions of changes happening across an estate. And it's kind of GUI driven. There's a lot of automation, and I think that's the secret to it. So to give you an idea, I mean, one of our key organizations, they're a bank in the US. They typically have anything up to about 10 million changes over one weekend when they roll out patches to an estate. But using the automation in the right way, they sort of hack through those because it's the same repeated change over and over again, and they're left with very, very few exceptions, which then get wrapped up. But the payoff from that is that if you do get a breach, which ordinarily would be buried, you know, ransomware, any incursion would be just buried by these millions of changes, it gets exposed, it gets brought to the surface, and you're actually able to head that off before it does some real damage.
Excellent. So for those listening in later, Mark, I mean, I know we could spend another 1 hour on this very easily, but for those listening in, if they want to get in touch, if they want to try the solution, I mean, I've used your products, I've used everything else on the planet pretty much, and I can tell you, it is so important. It may sound like an established thing, but it is one of the most important things you can do. If you can't be on top of your change, what's changing, then your the criminals are going to succeed. Full stop, you know. And that's my default position. But if someone did want to talk to you guys about doing a proof of concept trial, do you want to just quickly speak out the email address or the...
Yeah, sure. I mean, go to the website if you had the invitation, but it's nntws.com, and go on there. Lots of prompts for trial, and we're right behind it because it sells it itself. I think Lulu, who organised the event, she's also got some links for free stuff. So there's free vulnerability scanners you can take and use, free change control systems you can take and use with all that automation in Excellent. It. And, you know, we think it sells itself. So go ahead and give it a shot.
Yep. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Amar. Thanks, everybody, for attending the session today. All attendees will be receiving an email from us tomorrow with the resources that Mark has just mentioned, the resources on offer. Thank you so much for attending, and thank you to all our guest speakers today. Very insightful content and great session. So thank you all, and please enjoy the rest of your day.